Well, that certainly fooled you, didn't it? Our special happy birthday song instead of the regular intro, that is. Welcome to another edition of the Property Voice podcast, but not just any edition. It's our first birthday special edition. My name is Richard Brown, and thank you very much for joining me on the show today. Now, that song in the intro is actually the winner of a competition that was devised to come up with an alternative song to the traditional Happy Birthday to You version that we all know and love. Did you like it? Not sure. Anyway, I have to admit that in preparing for today's show, I reviewed quite a lot of birthday songs, as I was not sure if I could legally use the Stevie Wonder classic that was probably my first choice, first option. Had a lot of fun reviewing those, and although it's our birthday, rather than cry if I want to, instead I might indulge you in just a couple more of the entries that were in that competition, if that's okay with you. In addition to some slightly ropey, or in some cases quite profane, birthday tunes, we also have some birthday wishes from some of our Property Voice friends and contributors. Plus, no birthday celebration can be complete without the odd birthday present now, can it? So stay tuned for more on that. Okay, so on with the show. I don't know about you, but on my birthday I do tend to reflect on the past year and look forward to the one ahead as well. So we'll do a little bit of that as we go. But equally, we have some birthday wishes to help celebrate the past, along with a few top tips to look forward to the year ahead, and to share from some familiar names and friends of the show and the blog as well. But let's start off with one from Mark Morris, who wrote a blog post a little while back on investing in the USA for us. And this is what he has to say. Insert the Mark Morris voicemail here. Well, thank you, Mark, for that very nice birthday wish. I think you make a great point about property investing is both a numbers and an activity game. After all the negative changes to the buy-to-let landscape, should we just run to the hills, or should we just keep calm and carry on instead? Well, I personally tend to agree with what Mark was saying, that as long as the numbers stack up and we maintain our activity level to uncover suitable investment properties and opportunities, then we need not stop. We should just carry on. Okay, so we might have to factor in some extra costs now, mainly for taxation changes, but that's all they are, lines on a spreadsheet in our return on investment calculations. So crunch the numbers, reset our buying and rental criteria, negotiate harder, and consider some alternative strategies to help us to achieve our goals. For me, there is still plenty of opportunity, perhaps even more so, as some amateur investors will no doubt leave the market altogether. And those that remain active and committed, and of course are diligent in their research and deal evaluations, will still do well, I believe. Now, don't forget to reach out to Mark if you're anywhere near the Northwest. His email address is in the show notes if you want to find out more about him and his local meetup. But I kid you not, literally, when I say that I was preparing this episode and I got a first draft of what I wanted to say, when I received another birthday wish, last minute I have to say, but mind you, I requested the birthday wishes at the last minute as well, and I really wanted to include it in the show notes. But it comes from Akhil Patel, who's the director of Ascendant Strategy. Now, you may recall he provided some very meaty content around the 18-year property cycle a while back, and here's what he had to say. Dear Richard, a very happy birthday to Property Voice, and many congratulations on reaching this important milestone. In a sector awash with noise, it's very important for investors to be able to go to people who treat important topics with clarity and in a straightforward way. I've also been very impressed with the really meaty topics that you've tackled on your show, and you've managed to gather a real panel of experts to bring real insights to your listeners. If people want light and fluffy entertainment, people should go elsewhere. My main tip to listeners is this. Keep listening to Property Voice, of course. Yeah, thanks, Akhil. And don't overreact to policy changes that are coming about. Investment strategies should be simple, based on sound fundamentals. Take stock of the facts. Don't make decisions based on fear. Best wishes for the year or years ahead. Well, if I was ever looking for confirmation of my points about keeping on and following the fundamentals, Akhil has certainly helped to reinforce that point here, hasn't he? Thank you, Akhil. I quite like the meaty topic reference there, but maybe I should do a little bit of work on my light and fluffy side. I don't know. What do you think, listener? What do you think? Now, both Mark and Akil have congratulated us on reaching our first podcast birthday. And that's no mean feat, a full year of podcast episodes. I can hear and see many podcasts that have come and gone. It's bloody difficult, to be honest with you, to maintain the commitment, the creative ideas, the sheer workload, and indeed the energy of a weekly podcast recording. Trust me, I know what's involved. However, this is partly why I created 3 different podcast episode formats. And the first one is the series formats, which are all about developing a central theme over a month or so, or a month or few actually. And these allow us to dig deep into getting underneath a general concept in property. Now, we had Series 1, which was very much foundational in looking at many of the fundamentals of being a property investor and all the considerations that we need to put in place first of all. Then in Series 2, we had a look at the various cycles in property. Of course, that was where Akil joined us. And I continue to work on Series 3, which most probably will be aimed at looking at financing and creative financing more closely. Then, of course, there's the musings episodes, and these allow me to look at a single topic much more closely. So they're not necessarily part of a central theme like the series. I can just look at something and drill down a little bit deeper, and it could be anything in any particular week. But it does follow the similar format to the series episodes, so therefore it includes the other parts of the show, such as useful resources and indeed an opportunity for you to have your say as well. And finally, of course, and maybe if you've been listening recently, we've got our Soundbite episodes. And these are punchier, airing many of my top of mind issues that I face or hear about as I go about my business as a property investor. They also allow me lots of content flexibility, and so that I can address a whole range of different issues that affect both you and me in very practical terms. They also allow me to keep a regular slot with you in my diary so that you can get your regular property fix, as it were. You property junkie, you. Yeah, just like me. Yes, it does all get rather addictive in property, doesn't it? Well, talking of addictions, if you enjoy listening to property content via audio, then I have my first birthday gift for you. I'm going to release a secret property podcast, Monthly Surgery, for subscribers only. The aim is to have a group of committed, action-orientated property investors who have access to recordings tailored to their personal issues and challenges in property. I have some themes in mind already, such as should I incorporate, and if so, how many companies do I actually need? Or how do you value a property effectively? Or alternatively, how do I add value to a property such that a valuer will accept the revaluation, and so on. However, the real intention behind this concept of a surgery podcast is to handle your particular queries, not necessarily mine. I'm sure there'll be a bit of a mix and match approach. But it's going to be something like a mini apprenticeship of action-orientated, or rather for action-orientated property investors. And the best part, if you subscribe during April 2016, it will be completely free. At least for the first year, at least. So if you want to be involved in that, this sounds like a good idea. That's something you want to participate in. It will be an application-based subscription with limited numbers, because obviously if I'm going to tailor it to your needs, then I have to have a fairly manageable group of people that I can work with. And so to be considered, just drop me an email, podcast@thepropertyvoice.net, and let me know what you want to achieve over the next 12 months and what you think might help you or benefit you in some way through this type of process. I'll then be in touch to explore your application further, and don't forget that it'll be free for the first year as well. Okay, so now another birthday wish, and this time from Tony Gimple, a personal estate and business succession planning advisor from Planned Succession, who says this: a very happy birthday to the Property Voice, and here's to many, many more. My top tip for the coming year is that landlords shouldn't worry about all the headline tax and other changes. Instead, just concentrate on getting wealthier. Well, thank you very much, Tony. And I think at face value, this looks like a similar tip to those that we heard from both Mark and Akil earlier. However, it is worth closer inspection, I think. Now, you may recall that Tony joined me as a guest on the show and also wrote a guest blog post all about personal tax planning and whether to set up a company or not. Well, those 2 broadcasts were among the most responsive we've ever had here at the Property Voice, and so it clearly struck a chord with the mood and the sentiment of investors at that time. In fact, they still do, as Tony regularly lets me know that people get in touch with him for advice months after we went live with those particular episodes and blog posts. Now, his key point is to have the right focus and perspective when it comes to property investing. It's all about wealth creation, or whatever term you want to find that's acceptable to you if you don't like that particular one. And it's less about the micro detail of taxation changes. Well, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we should be reckless and just ignore tax altogether, but we should probably leave that to the professionals to advise us on, rather than spending hours and hours on end digging into the details ourselves. And awareness, yes. Details, okay, perhaps bring in the advice and, get a bit educated so we can make good judgment calls, that's for sure. But instead, let's stay focused on our desired outcomes instead with property investing. Why are we doing this? It's usually for things like replacing an income, having a comfortable retirement, providing for people we care about, leaving a legacy, giving back, or just having a better quality of life or more choice and freedom, just to name some. So I think that's a point really. Be focused on the head and not the tail, I guess you could say. Okay, so let's have a quick break from my voice for a minute and have a quick listen to another of those birthday song entries. I should let you know that this is slightly unconventional, and so you may need to turn the volume down just a wee bit. Just a little bit of forewarning for you. Insert the next tune here, which is from Daminals. I think it is. Super psyched for your birthday. Thanks a lot. Okay. So I promise that will be the last of those birthday songs. Well, until the outro, that is. When you have the option, it's an option of listening to my favourite one. Or you can just skip that bit altogether and get on with whatever else you had planned for that 2-minute slot instead. So until this point, we've looked at and celebrated the podcast birthday. But that's not the only birthday that we have to celebrate today. In fact, we have another 2 birthdays that are due for celebration of this month as well. So it's obviously a very productive time, let's say, in the Property Voice household, metaphorically speaking, of course. So the first one I want to mention, the first other birthday, is the Property Investor Toolkit. And that was my first book. And that was published exactly a year ago now as well. So it's also celebrating a birthday as well. And on launch, it became an Amazon bestseller. Okay, it was a free book then, if you want to split hairs. So, okay, it was a bestseller in the free book listings. Okay, caveat over. And but it's sold regularly since then, each and every month. And but most pleasing to me of all of this is that the number of positive reviews that it has and continues to receive each and every month. I get messages from people who've read the book as well. I share freely the links that are in it and a few other bonus materials as well for people who bought the book and written in. And that just makes me really proud, to be quite honest with you, to be supporting the property community with these valuable knowledge and insights. I'd say valuable knowledge and insights though, wouldn't I? Yes. But by the way, if you do own a copy of the book and you promise to leave a review, you can just simply relieve your guilt by clicking on the book link in the show notes to leave a review right now. That'd be great. But I also have a small gift for you to mention in a minute. So, but first, before we get to that, let's just talk about the other birthday to get them all out onto the table. And the final birthday I really want to mention today is it was exactly 3 years ago that the Property Voice was born. And it started out in life as a curated newsfeed service on the Scoopit platform. And it still exists today, having had nearly 20,000 visitors. The idea of the newsfeed is to select 1 or 2 property news stories daily that distill some of the noise in property into the key issues for property investors. Now, some of the earlier posts were more like full-on blog posts than short insights. Which is more what they look like more so today. But that's exactly why the Property Voice blog was created as well. So now I share the short snippets or insights through the news feed, and longer elaborations from both myself and indeed a number of guest bloggers now at the propertyvoice.net blog site. But I bet you've seen these already, but all the links will be in the show notes just in case. But on the subject of guest blog posts, one such contribution came recently from Stefan Gastjager. I hope I've said that. Actually, have I said that right? Gastjager is probably the right way of saying it. Sorry about that, Stefan. Messed up. In fact, I'm going to re-record that paragraph because it sounds really stupid. On the subject of guest blog posts, one such contribution came recently from Stefan Gastjager. I've done it again. Hang on, I'm going to re-record again. On the subject of guest blog posts, one such contribution came from Stefan Gastjager, who wrote a thought-provoking piece on rent controls. And he contrasted rent controls as a possibility, that's hard to say, isn't it, here in the UK with those in parts of Europe, that exist in parts of Europe. And the European feel is very much alive in his birthday wish and top tip for the year ahead as well, which goes as follows. Happy birthday to the Property Voice, wishing you all the best and ongoing success. What would be my top tip for property investment in the year ahead? I would invest in Germany, but since large cities have already done well over the last few years, I would rather focus on investing in period buildings in the Berlin periphery, as well as in second-tier East German cities such as Leipzig and Halle. Those regions benefit from population growth, a growing industry, startup and media scene, and hence gentrification. You can still get yields above 5%, but mortgage rates are at an all-time low, somewhere around 1%. Prices per square metre generally are still well below €2,500, compared to double to 3 times this in most of the desirable Berlin locations. Hence, this provides you with a decent yield, attractive capital growth, as well as diversification away from your pound sterling exposure. And Stefan is the owner of lokaberlin.de. The link is in the show notes, and I'm sure there's a lot of good information about that local marketplace from that link as well. But thank you, Stefan, for the birthday wish and that top tip. And whilst it's quite specific and indeed niche in its nature, Stefan reiterates a really good general investment principle, that of diversification. And just as Mark Morris, who I mentioned earlier, invests in the USA, Stefan clearly thinks Germany offers some decent investment options and an opportunity to diversify by both country and currency. I too invest in property in several different countries, so spreading the concentration risk around. However, a word of caution before boarding the next EasyJet flight to Berlin to go house hunting home or away style. Do your research. Do your research first, and remember, things can be very different in overseas property markets. And just as investing in alternative currency markets via property adds to the diversification principle, it does also bring into play currency risk as well. So you can see from my own experience that I'm in favour of an overseas investment in principle. However, I tend to invest only in markets that I know and understand, or have some very good personal connections there. It can be a little bit like the Wild West in some or certain overseas markets, so venture forward by all means, but do tread carefully if you do. Now, I have one final birthday wish and top tip to share with you today, and that comes from David Clouter, a very experienced property investor with a colourful approach to sharing his knowledge if you've ever heard him talk. David he joined me on the show to talk about a range of different strategies that he has been involved in over his 30-year plus investment career. And here's what he had to say. Many congratulations on reaching this important milestone. Your book, podcast, newsfeed and blog perform a vital service in shedding valuable light on the constantly shifting sands of the property world. My top tip for 2016 moving forward, at every level people should find themselves an experienced mentor with their finger on the pulse. There are still plenty of ways to make good money in property, but investors need to stay sharp and keep abreast of developments to stay one step ahead of the game, and always do the opposite to the herd. Best wishes, David. Well, you can find David most easily on Facebook, and he's a very prolific poster in several property communities on Facebook. And there's a link to David's Facebook profile in the show notes as well if you want to look him up. But thank you, David, for such kind words and for drawing together most of what the Property Voice is all about, really, which is knowledge sharing through different types of media. Now, David makes a great point about getting an experienced mentor to help guide the way and accelerate the journey. I know that David mentors property investors himself, as indeed do I. And I read a while back that whilst mentoring is not for everyone, for those that it is for, the results are often very significant indeed. And if you look at many people at the top of their profession, leading a company or in elite sports or entertainment and the arts, a good many of them will attest to having a mentor or guide of some description. I do too, so I'm not just a peddler touting for business here, I'm also a lifelong student of both property and indeed business. Someone that constantly invests in my own learning and development through training and mentoring. So, I definitely walk the talk. It's not just all talk and no action here. But choosing a mentor is a very personal thing, and indeed the chemistry between mentor and mentee can be equally as important as their experience and knowledge. However, make sure you do find a mentor that can actually direct your path in the best way forward, and that often means been there, done that on the part of the mentor. A coach, on the other hand, need not have specific experience in the chosen field and is more skilled in getting the best out of you personally so that you maximize your capabilities and results. So mentoring or acquiring knowledge can come in a variety of different ways. An example is this very podcast. Another way is through books, and of course that brings me back to my final present for our birthday show today. And my book, Property Investor Toolkit, is available as a paperback, but it's also available in Kindle format from the Amazon store. And between the day after this podcast goes live, so that, to be clear, is the date I'm referring to is Thursday the 7th of April from 8 a.m. to be precise, until Sunday the 10th of April at 11 p.m, the Kindle version of the book will be available for less than £1. I don't make a profit on the book in any event. It's priced to be break even. So at 99 pence, my objective is clearly not financial. Rather, it's a gift of a couple of quid off the usual price of the book to help you have a good foundation in property investing, that is. And if you happen to own a copy of the book already, I'm sure you won't begrudge the couple of pounds extra you might have had to pay. At least comfort yourself in the knowledge that another property investor like you will probably have access to a source of knowledge and resources to set them on their merry way for the price of a bar of chocolate. Now you would appreciate that, wouldn't you? Yeah, I'm sure you would. And if you already do own a copy of the book in one form or another, then well, maybe you'd like the Kindle version. But more importantly, perhaps a friend or a family member may appreciate a copy too, and then maybe you can direct them to how they can get a copy at a very good price. So spread the love, share the knowledge. That's what I say. So there you have it then. It's a very special episode of the Property Voice podcast as we celebrate our first year. However, there have been some useful tips and some value along the way as well. I hope you will agree. Now, I do hope you're enjoying the show, and do you know what would make a great birthday present for me? An iTunes review of the podcast would do rather nicely, if you wouldn't mind. So please head over to the Property Voice podcast on iTunes and do leave a written review. We particularly like the ones with 5 stars. Just saying. But don't forget the mini apprentice that I mentioned earlier, write in for that, and of course the discounted book offer from the 7th to the 10th of April as well for less than £1. And you can always email me, podcast@thepropertyvoice.net, and we can have a good old property chat. Some of you do that quite regularly. Yeah, I'm not going to call your names out today, but I do get regular notes from people just checking in now and again. Maybe I've stirred up something on the weekly podcast that triggers them. So thanks for all that chit chat. I really appreciate it, and glad you get a lot of value out of it too. Now the show notes with the references can be found over at the website, thepropertyvoice.net. Finally though, a special word of thanks has to go to Matthew, who edits and produces the show each week, and indeed Colin before him. Thanks guys, and sorry for all the mixing that you had to do this week. I really appreciate it. Right, I'm off to find Kazza and crack open a bottle of champers to celebrate all these birthdays. Most of all, though, thank you to the tens and thousands of you that have either listened, read, or otherwise engaged in the Property Voice community in one way or another over the past year or three. And as Vinnie Jones once said, it's been emotional. Now I shall leave you with my favourite entry to that birthday song competition as the outro, if you want to stick around and listen to it, that is. But the lyrics are kind of hilarious, I have to say, so it might be worth 2 minutes of your time just to have a good old listen and laugh at that. But until next time on the Property Voice podcast, it's ciao ciao. Insert the final song from Romy Scott here. These are all implanted in the show notes, so it should be fairly obvious. Thanks Matthew, and I shouted you out right at the end, you might have picked up. Cheers.